right, good evening, everyone. We have the honor of being your last panel today. My name is Kate Porter. I'm a partner and head of the sports law practice at Vela Wood, which is a boutique law firm in Dallas. If each of my panelists wouldn't mind introducing yourselves quickly.
Thanks, yep. My name is Daniel G. I'm a sports and football lawyer at Sheridan's in London.
My name is Enrique Ripoll. I'm a licensed attorney here in the US and in Spain. I am the managing partner of my firm, ER Sports Law and Arbitration.
And Jose Martin, counsel with Squire Patton Boggs here in Miami.
Great. So the topic we're going to discuss today is the new FIFA football agent regulations that have come into effect only recently. So, I'll start with you, Enrique. What are the football agent regulations?
Well, it's a set of regulations that intend to regulate the agent's activity in the market right now. It's been in place, part of it, since the 1st of January this year. The most tricky part entered into force in October this year, not around the world, because we'll talk about it, but many challenges. But it's been approved since 2019. We were talking about the long journey that agents have faced, and this is no exception.
Okay. So what do these regulations do? Enrique, if you want to jump in that. Yeah.
So the regulations try to, FIFA in 2019 decided to limit the activity of agents to two activities, which is the transfer agreement and the employment contract. So for FIFA, everything that is outside of that is not an agent activity, and therefore it's not regulated under the FIFA regulations. So since 2019, and with a long journey in consulting with stakeholders, agents, players, clubs, etc., FIFA decided in the 1st of January to implement these new regulations that basically said, from now on, everyone that wants to be a football agent has to be certified by FIFA. Every federation around the world had to issue two exams, one in February, now another one in September, that will decide who's not an agent, prohibiting everyone that is not an agent to participate in football transfers or negotiating employment disputes, and setting a sort of requirements like continuous education, insurance, prohibition of contacting minors, set up framework for tests for players that are underage when they go to academies, etc. So more or less giving some certainty to the world of football.
Wonderful. So my understanding is this is not the first time that FIFA has attempted to regulate the agents industry. Daniel, why don't you talk about kind of the predecessors to the football agent regulations and kind of how we ended up where we are?
Of course, no, thank you. So, yeah, it's an interesting, well, for at least lawyers anyway, an interesting side story. Before 2015, we had a type of exam, an international licensing system, and from 2015 until, as we said quite recently, the national associations were regulating the agency activity. And now what has come in, or is coming in different jurisdictions, is certain quite controversial measures that I know we're going to talk about. But in brief, the controversy around football agency and around the regulation of football agents is because FIFA has said, we think football agents are earning too much money. We think we need to cap their commission at 3% and 3%. Query, how proportionate that is. We've got issues around the exam and all of those types of logistical problems that developed. There are other issues around now. FIFA wants the player to pay their agent, which historically in Europe and other jurisdictions they didn't do. It was always the club paying on the player's behalf. Also areas around representing all the parties in a transaction. So you guys might remember from a few years ago, Mino Raiola, rest in peace when he was alive, is the controversy which I think FIFA were trying and stem was the Pogba deal, where he acted for Juventus, the selling club. He acted for the player Pogba and acted for Manchester United, the buying club, and earning quite a lot of commission from it. And I think my feeling to a degree is FIFA's reactionary element was, well, has he earned too much money? Do we need to regulate these conflicts of interest? And do we need to bring the agents back in line?
Sure, yes. The other benefit you have here now is you have a system where FIFA can hold football agents accountable. If there are breaches of rules, breaches of ethics, there now is a process by which you can regulate the football agents. I think it goes without saying that some of these provisions have been quite controversial, and now we're seeing legal challenges in various parts of the world. One of the most important legal proceedings going through right now is a arbitration in England and also proceedings before the ECJ. So Daniel, I'll jump back to you. Can you talk a little bit about those legal challenges?
Yep. Look, for us as sports lawyers, it's, in my mind, a fascinating moment in the sports and football industry. We have the Super League judgment, which is coming out very soon as well. We have a UK FA arbitration decision, which is, in my understanding, the first time that the merits of this commission cap and other elements are actually going to be concluded. Now, what has happened in principle is the Football Association in the UK has actually suspended the implementation of the FIFA regulations pending the outcome of this decision. And it's a shame, unfortunately, Emilio can't be with us today because he would have given us some more insight on that as much as he was be able to. But in brief, because it is a merits decision and because the UK is effectively the biggest transfer market, if that decision goes in favor of the agents, and just to be clear, you know, we are talking about CAA, Stella, ICM, BASE, and another agency, which is a smaller agency, Arete, but they combined are, what WMG, sorry, also, they have the resources to take on FIFA at this national level. So if they are successful, there has to be a distinct query about whether the regulations can then actually go forward for the time being and query whether that might be the case. And then very briefly, the Court of Justice. There have been referrals to the Court of Justice by national European courts. That is a process and will likely hear some type of advocate general opinion possibly next year. But the real emphasis, at least the interest for me as a UK sports lawyer, will be inside the next 10 days, there will be a very big decision in the UK, which will go to the heart of whether the agents' regs are going to survive over the next couple of months.
Interesting. What are you seeing, Enric?
Well, like, as Daniel said, the main focus of FIFA now is the arbitration in England, but we also have injunctions like interim measures in Spain that were issued last week, suspending the implementation of Article 15, paragraph 1 and 2, which is the commission cap. We have proceedings before the German courts also that actually led FIFA to decide that any transfer around Germany or touching Germany in any way would be not using the new FIFA regulations. So it's for now here in the United States. We were talking now with my colleague here, Alexander, about the relevant decision, which also has seems that to have an effect on the implementation at a national level here in the United States about the FIFA regulations. So there's many countries that because of their national laws, FIFA will have a hard time implementing that at the national level, or the national federation implementing that at a national level. Like in Spain, it is true that commercial courts have like an is-it trigger to issue suspending or interim measures, but like happened the same with the Super League also. But it is true that at the end of the day, you cannot just implement regulations without going to the courts as FIFA organizing like the world of football as a private company, private entity in Switzerland around 211 countries without expecting to suffer some backlash.
Sure.
Well, and one thing that makes sense to think about is we're all talking about Europe, but the rest of the world in 211 countries, Europe makes the bulk of the money, but not the bulk of the number of countries. And if you go through and do a survey of the other countries that are not in Europe, I don't think there's not a lot of outrage at the regulations, but it might not be, and based on some informal surveying I did, it might be because they're not seeing the regulations as really affecting them. FIFA's not pushing them as hard. Several countries haven't implemented a national regulation. Several countries haven't changed their regulations from before 2018. So there's a lot of non-activity all over the world, certainly in Latin America, certainly in South America and the region, our region. So maybe we can think about this as a European issue for now. And once the UK decision comes out, maybe it's a global issue.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. And Jose, in the United States, I don't think it's a foreign concept for us that agents would be regulated and their fee caps. Certainly, this exists in other professional sports leagues. How do you see these regulations as the same or different than what exists in the other professional sports leagues?
The regulations are similar in terms of cap, right? The NBA has a similar cap. The NFL has a similar cap. But there's two important aspects that people don't always think about. In the U.S., the players are the ones driving the cap. So the players are the ones saying, I want a cap. I want my agents to be professional. I want my agents to be registered, and I want my agents to get a specific fee. And in this case, FIFA is not driven by the players. It's driven by the global organization. So it's a little different. Another thing to consider quickly is the sports that don't have a cap. The Major League in baseball doesn't have a cap. There are no agent caps because I think the players see it as a different fact. So this is something that's interesting to compare the U.S. and football generally.
Yeah.
Interestingly, talking about what you said just about the 211 countries, in 2017, I think FIFPro issued a survey or a report where they reported that more than 75% of the football players around the world, make less than $1,000 a month. So actually reducing the cap to 5%, 3% in over 200,000, it's just making agents that have, 15, 20 players that make $1,500 a month to actually now they need double those players to make a living. Mm-hmm. So FIFA, in a sense, is kind of attacking their own agency because who's going to work now for 25 players making $50 a player? It's absurd.
Right. I think there's been a lot of focus on the cap of agents fees, and probably rightly so. But the point that you mentioned earlier, Enrique, is that the FIFA's regulations are really concerned with the employment contract, but agents do much more than just employment work and transfers. So how do you envision that there is a way around this the agent cap where agents will charge higher commissions on non-employment related agreements in order to kind of make up the difference?
Well, FIFA for sure, they said that what they want to do is to allow agents to charge for their activity as agents, and then allow agents to charge the players in exchange of those services that are usually being done for the sake of the commission fee, right? Mm-hmm. So you charge 10%, a part of negotiating the transfer agreement or the employment contract, you usually are, as an agent, you are looking for the school for the kids, for the apartment for the players and their wives and their families and whatever. They're looking for a car, looking for the best neighborhood in the city. There are some other things like checking on the girlfriend while the wife is not there, right? But all these kind
How
of
much
things,
can you charge for that?
Well, it depends on the wife. But at the end of the day, it is true that if you circumscribe the activity of agents solely to transfer agreement and employment contracts, and everything else is deregulated, there's going to be hundreds of companies, freelancers that will try to do those jobs in a market that will not have FIFA jurisdiction, FIFA control, insurance, or anything. So instead of helping the players to be secure with their agents, they are, okay, you will be secure here, but once you open the door and go outside, you're going to be mugged in the street.
There's an interesting bit as well, Kate, on that, which is what FIFA are actually doing here in order to ensure the non-circumvention of the regulations is they are actually saying agents that conduct other services, so boot deals, other type of brand endorsement, financial service work, etc., is that now the agent has to declare those services and provide that information to FIFA to make sure that there is not a circumvention of the cap, that they are just, as you said, we're taking 50% of your boot deal or 80% of something else, and that the presumption is in favor of FIFA. So the agents have to prove, the burden of proof is on the agent to show that it is, I guess, effectively at market rate and commercial. So FIFA are actually extending again their area of competency to ensure that circumvention doesn't happen.
Interesting. Some of the things that we discussed, in preparation for this panel was the unforeseen consequences of these regulations. And Daniel, you had a really interesting perspective on this.
Well, it depends what you class as interesting, to be fair.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I think one of the things I've chatted about with a number of colleagues, some that are here in this room, is one of the areas almost of regulatory reach that FIFA is entailing is, in my mind, the player paying principle. So in the UK and a lot in Europe and other jurisdictions, usually as a benefit to the player, the club pays the agent directly. Now that can have tax consequences, obviously. But in England, what effectively then that means is that if the player has to pay his or her agent directly, the way that the tax system works is that has to be paid out of their net income rather than their gross income. And that can actually have quite significant tax consequences. The other practical consequence, fortunately or unfortunately, is you may be surprised or not to know that players sometimes aren't the most organized and aren't the best with their finances.
No.
So what we're worried about actually happening is, will players actually pay their agents every quarter, as the FIFA regulations say? Will the agent at the time of a transfer renegotiation agree with the club that the club will make a deduction out of their net salary? All of these points, and they lead to the same thing, which is dispute, because the practicalities of what are going on is not probably just quite intricately defined at the moment. So for me, one of the big unintended consequences is actually a very boring tax point. And that I'm actually, I don't know about you guys, but I'm really surprised that the players' associations in the national jurisdictions haven't come down hard on one particular point, i.e. this player paying, because in my mind, it should be absolutely up to the player whether they decide to elect for the club to pay on their behalf and there's a tax consequence, or they decide to pay directly and they work out with their accountant and financial team what's best for them.
Interesting. You know, I think one of the aspects that we talked about was the fact that I think previously agents were paid out in a lump sum at the beginning of the contract, and now you know, the agents are going to be paid out as the players being paid. And there's kind of a carry-on or drag-on effect, and I'll jump to this to you, Enrique. We were discussing earlier, you know, what are the risks to the agent now the way that the agent's going to be paid is changing?
Well, the fact that, for example, now FIFA says you will be paid the commission that your contract that you negotiated on the contract. But if the player does not respect the whole amount of the whole time within, you will stop being paid. If you negotiate a $1 million deal per year for 5 years, and the player leaves the club for year 3, the last 2 years you're not getting paid. If then you combine that with the limitation of 2 years representation contract, means that if you are left 1 year under the deal, and then you have 5 years that you negotiate in the last year of your representation contract, and the player changes the agent because he doesn't want to work with you anymore, means that for the next 4 years, you probably are going to lose that revenue, because obviously the new agent will not want to pay you. So he will either renegotiate the contract, force a transfer, so you, after doing the work, you will not be paid for what you did. I was talking with Jose precisely, like, if I negotiate a deal of $1 million settlement agreement with a client, and the client decides to pay $800,000 to the debtor, I will charge him for the $1 million I settled, not for the $800,000 that he decided to pay. So at the end of the day, that's detrimental for the agent itself.
Yeah,
and there's no certainty.
Right, and there's a lot of unintended consequences that you can't. And one of the things, compliance is hard. Yeah. And if you're not thinking about compliance at the FIFA level, of course, at the national level and the club level, and there's no political will to continue pushing these regulations through, all of this unintended consequences, the tax issue, there's always pushback. And one of the reasons you might not be seeing player associations push back is because they might just not be thinking about this, because other than a few countries, it's just really not being enforced and not really an issue. So I think once FIFA starts pushing this, and Emilio, without him being here, so maybe I'm misquoting him, but I don't think I am. He said FIFA's not making any money from this. Right. Actually, FIFA is losing money from this. And Emilio, forgive me if I'm wrong, but if FIFA's not making money and losing money from this, at some point there's going to be an issue of political will continuing to push and with agents and players and clubs all pushing back and saying no, maybe maybe it's up to the confederations, maybe it's going to be a change. I think this is going to be maybe it's going to be a new discussion in a year or two, maybe to try to rethink this a little bit and bring everyone more together.
Yeah.
And I think just one point, if it's right, just for 20 seconds, was I think one of the big bits of armory that an agent has is, if I'm the agent and I'm due €1 million, for example, but maybe it's not €1 million up front, it's, as you said, in installments over 4 years. Me as the lawyer trying to help the agent, I want to be able to try and be in a strong position to say that amount is guaranteed. Because like you said, player leaves the rep contract in 2 years, more or less done, because then there'll be a new employment contract signed. I think one of the big, I feel, regulatory oversteps to a degree, and we've talked about it in prep in this, is the agent is very unlikely to see that €1 million, if in fact at all. They've provided most of the services, but the club still has the significant power over that type of process. And that's something that you don't probably hear as much about, because who wants to hear poor old agent not receiving all of their commission? But I think when they are ultimately undertaking those services, that's when they are doing that work. And it's always, well, you get one installment, within X amount of days of the transfer, first anniversary, second anniversary, third anniversary. I think the agent knows, unless it's guaranteed, they're not seeing most of that commission.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll end very quickly. I'll say, at the end of the day, you have to enforce these regulations. And what challenges do you see enforcing these regulations over the long haul?
Like everything, if you do something global at this level of, I think it's too global and then you're going to enforce it at the national level, and you're going to enforce it with people. And I think it's going to be a big challenge. It's going to be a big challenge to really enforce it consistently, without clubs, without players, without people spending money and getting lawyers to help them out.
So what I'm hearing is the lawyers win here.
Yeah, I think there's an incentive to lawyer up.
If you didn't get it, we are accepting applications. There's going to be a lot more work in the coming months.
Wonderful. So I think that's about all the time that we have for our panel. Thank you all for attending, and
Thanks, guys.
yeah, enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.